One of the most unpleasant topics to discuss with my folks from North India is the amount of what I call Urduization. What I meant by Urduization is the amount of Urdu influence that has overtaken Hindi and Northern India since independence. This is also the topic that is generally ignored or avoided in any discussion for various reasons. The so-called mainstream media or the scholars don't even want to talk about it. They don't even want to touch this topic with a 10-foot pole. Most people are uncomfortable for some reason to even look into this issue for the simple fear that they might be seen as someone from Hindutva brigade or some right-wing nutcase. Because there is this notion in India that if you start talking about language or the culture or the past or history, all of a sudden, they label you as one of the right-wing nutcases. It's one of those politically incorrect thing to do. That's precisely why I want to talk about it, because it's important to understand what's going on, how it's affecting our culture, policies, our mindset, and more importantly, the national conversation, which can eventually affect the future of Indian Republic. Because in my opinion, language is not just a collection of words. It represents our past, our heritage, our culture, and also many things that define who we are as a nation. In order to understand how far Hindi speakers have gone from its Sanskrit roots, just take a look at some of the words I'm going to mention now. Kitab, Lekin, Kush, Kahani, Ishq, Kanun, Pasand, Mulk, Khabar, Zindagi, right? I can keep go on and on and on. I'm not even talking about the words that are used once in a while. The words that I just mentioned, these are everyday, commonly used words. The words like, even the words like namaste or dhanyavad or shubhashe are slowly being forgotten. You hear shukriya, salam, and mubarak these days. Even Prime Minister of India and some of the top leaders use the word mubarak in the context of a Hindu festival. I mean, that's unbelievable. So you get an idea what I'm talking about. We don't have Sant Kabir's Hindi anymore. Today's Hindi sounds more like Urdu than Sanskrit-based language. So now the question is, why did this happen? Why is Hindi-speaking population voluntarily adopting more and more Persian Arabic words from Urdu? Why is there an attempt to replace Sanskrit words and eventually merge Hindi with Urdu? What does it mean to India and its future? These are some of the questions we should be asking. Well, this is where we need to look at the underlying forces and motives. Remember, these changes are happening for a reason, driven by certain motives, a certain agenda. Look, every language goes through changes. It's part of its natural cycle, right? So let's look at why does a language borrow words from other places and languages. If you look at those scenarios, there are three reasons. The first one is lack of words in the native language. For example, due to certain scientific innovation or due to some certain discoveries, there might be a new name coming out of scientific community, or maybe there is a new product. In those cases, it's easier to adopt new words from a foreign language. For example, car, the bus, and the internet, television, train, radio, bacteria, virus, cancer, right? These are all like, kind of new words, every native language adopt because it's much easier. This is understandable and it's very common. Now let's look at the second scenario where we get new words into a native language. Now this happens when you have a very popular language at the international and domestic level. The best example is English. The knowledge of English is very, very useful in finding good jobs, both in domestic and international level. Nobody, we don't care about Portuguese or Japanese or Korean, but English is very important. It's good for the job market, it's good for the economy, it's good for the business, right? So naturally, people might using those English words in their native language more and more. So this is another reason why you might get some foreign words in your native language. Now let's look at the last reason, the third one, and the last one. This is what bothers me, because this is probably why Hindi speakers are moving towards Urdu. So the third reason is lack of self-respect and confidence in the face of an aggressive external force. In my opinion, this is the main reason why Hindi is being dominated by Urdu words. Let me break this down for you. I want you to consider this. I want you to ask yourself. Think of Hindi-speaking community and Urdu-speaking community. Who is more likely to learn and change their language? Who is going to be more open-minded about new words? Which community do you think will be more aggressive? You follow me? Do you think a Urdu speaker will be more open-minded about learning Sanskrit words? Or is it vice versa? Is it like Hindi speaker willing to be more open-minded to learn Urdu words? You understand where I'm coming from, right? So this is why Bollywood, TV channels, and print media are pushing Hindi speakers towards Urdu, because they know that it is much easier to do so than asking Urdu speakers to accept Sanskrit words. Remember, there is a big market for these movies and the songs and the TV programs in Urdu-speaking communities, both in India and outside India. Media and movie industry want to maintain and maximize their profits. Did you ever wonder why Bollywood songwriters and the script writers are always Urdu-speaking Muslims? What happened to the Hindi writers? If you look at the movie title, the language, and the dialogues and the songs, all come fully loaded with Urdu words, right? Nobody says like a prem katha, they say prem kahani, right? This consistent, organized effort has effectively wiped out Sanskrit influence in Hindi and moved Hindi speakers very close to Urdu. Every year it gets worse. The sad part of this ongoing, unfortunate transition is how uninformed and manipulated the entire North Indian Hindi-speaking population has become. I mean, it's reached a point where using more and more Urdu words has become a fashion, especially among those pseudo-intellectuals and pseudo-secular people. The politicians are not too far behind. As I said, I've seen the Prime Minister tweeting and using the word Mubarak in the context of Hindu festival. I mean, how bad can it get? This is a sad trend that's going on. Now, in addition to losing your own identity and heritage, this trend is dangerous for another reason, and here's why. Look at this entire situation from a non-Hindi speaking person's point of view. especially from South India. As such, there is enough distrust between the so-called Hindi belt and the South India for various reasons. I'm not going to talk about it in this podcast. That's a whole different topic. And we all know, any person with minimum knowledge of Indian history knows how North India has become a victim of centuries of cultural invasion and has lost its heritage, language, and many aspects of its culture to invaders over many, many centuries, right? So Hindi moving towards Urdu, or Hindi speakers moving towards Urdu, is seen by rest of India, especially like a South Indian and non-Hindi speaking communities, as the continuation of the same aggressive forces in action. In other words, that cultural invasion continues. Now, if you're a South Indian, where South Indian Dravidian languages are rich with Sanskrit influence, this is a very concerning thing. This is a red flag. You don't want this influence to go south of India. I worry about India's future and how this cultural decay can result in distrust, conflict, and separatist movement. As I said earlier, this is much more than collection of words. This is about mindset. This is about our heritage. This is about aggressive forces trying to override our culture and language identity, creating a slave mindset. I want every thinking, rational, well-meaning person to be aware of this reality. Educate yourself and others. Talk about this. Try to push back on this aggressive force. Confront those people, confront those groups who are trying to force more and more Urdu words on Hindi-speaking community, whether it is Bollywood or TVs or some pseudo-seculars. Try to protect our 5,000 years old Bharatiya culture, where Sanskrit is the central piece of that culture. Thank you for listening.